Hi there, my name is Rolando Tanquano. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Heureux de vous retrouver dans ce nouveau cours. I believe that if you've chosen this course, you are trying or willing to learn how to speak French, which is a fantastic choice because, no doubt about it, French is one of the most spoken languages in the world, top five. However, it can be one of the most difficult languages to learn. However, with this course, thanks to this course, I will ensure that you grasp the foundations of the French language. The goal of this course is to ensure that you have the fundamentals, the basics, and a solid foundation in order to speak French in a professional way and to have a proper conversation in a professional and decent way. All right, so without further ado, we will be starting our course and delving into the foundations of the French language. I am excited to be with you in this journey. I will be helping you throughout this journey. You will have multiple PDFs, multiple resources to help you learn the French language. And also, if you have any questions, I will be here to help you out and to answer as soon as possible. So without further ado, thank you once again for attending, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone, welcome to the first video of this French course. As always, brief introduction. I am your instructor, Rolando Tanquano. I have a bachelor's degree in biology and in chemistry from Texas Southern University and a master's in nutrition from the University of Central Arkansas in the United States. I speak French and English. French is my native language, and I've learned English by staying and residing in the US. All right, so without further ado, in this video, we will be talking about the alphabet, right? Because when we talk about a language, we must learn the alphabet. Now, good thing is that in English, the alphabet is pretty much the same as the alphabet in French, okay? So, as you can see here, this is the PDF that we'll be working on throughout this course. As you can see here, we will cover many details. All right, we'll have introductory lessons. All right, we'll talk about the alphabet, we'll talk about the accents, how to greet, how to come up with formal speech, okay, how to have a daily conversation. All right, and so much more, okay, because we're not going to waste time on the list. As we go through, you will see by yourself. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into this, right? So we have multiple lessons, lesson 1 all the way to 10. And this is just a portion of the course, okay? Beside this, I will be adding multiple resources, okay, such as how to learn the colors, how to know the numbers in French, and much more, okay? This course will be very vast and very, I would say, broad, okay? It will cover many, many details of the French language. All right, so without further ado, let's have a look at the alphabet, right? So we all know that in English, for example, the alphabet starts with A and ends with Z. So here on the screen, as you can see, we have the French alphabet, okay? So what I'll do is go over, okay? I will go over the alphabet in French, and all you have to do is repeat after me, okay? So if I go too fast, you can pause the video, or if I go too slow, you can just fast forward it, okay? So let's start. So we know that A in English is A, but in French it is A, okay? A. So instead of just pronouncing the alphabet in English first, I'll just go ahead and recite, I would say, the alphabet solely in French, okay? So listen carefully in this case. So let's start with the first letter, which is A. A, A, A. Okay. The second one will be B, 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 B. All right. Third one will be C, C, C. All right. The fourth one, D, 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 D. E in this case is E, 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 E. All right. F is F, 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 F. All right. J is J, J, J. Okay, H is H, H, H. Li here is E, E, E. Okay, the other one will be J in English, but G, G in French, G. Okay, the following one will be K, which is K, K, K. Li, li, li will be L, L, L. Okay, so L in French is L, L. M is M, pretty much the same as in English. N is N, pretty much the same as in English. O is O, but pretty much the same as in English. P is P, 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 P. Okay? The subsequent one will be Q, which is Q, Q, Q. R, which is R, R, R. And then S is S, 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 as in English. T is T, 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 T. U is U, U, U. V is V, 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 V. W is W, W. So W, I repeat, is W. X is X, X, X. Y is Y, Y, Y. And Z is Z. All right? So hopefully now you have the pronunciation, and good thing is that I've written down the phonetics of the pronunciation in this chart. Okay, so you'll be able to download this PDF and utilize it at your convenience and practice as much as you can. All right, so one thing you have to keep in mind is that in addition, French uses several accents which are very important. Okay, so let's have a look at the accents, right? So we have A with an accent going from top to bottom, leading or leaning towards the right side, which is called A accent aigu. We have an E with both accents, so you have accents that lead or lean towards the left side, and another one that leans towards the right side. Okay, and we will be discussing further down the line about the differences between these ones. And then there's another accent as I'll call it a hat, which is called accent circonflexe, okay? And much more, okay? But here, as you can see on the second chart, okay, we have examples of the letters, okay, and how they are utilized in the French language, all right? So let's move on to the next page. So in this section, again, we have a portion of the different letters and their pronunciation on the right side. Okay, so we're not going to delve into this too much because at the end of the day, we will be covering lots of examples where we will be pronouncing the sentences in French. Okay, but this is just a repertory for you in order to master the alphabet and the pronunciation. Okay, keep in mind that we also have what's called final consonants. Okay, so in French, certain consonants are silent when they are the final letter of a word. Okay, for example, the letters P, as in the word coup, we do not say coupe, but we say coup simply. So we do not accentuate the last letter in certain words in French. Now, it will make sense later on as we go through this course and you start reading books in French, it will make much more sense. Okay? Another example is cat. Cat in French is chat. There's a T at the end of chat, but we do not pronounce it. Okay, so these are just examples. Okay, and then we also have dental consonants. We have BNP, and then many other examples. Okay, so here we can see there's many examples. Okay, of this example. So get a loose of paper. Okay, if you can get a loose paper, hold the piece of paper about 1 inch in front of your face, say the words baby and puppy like you normally would in English. Okay? Now notice how the paper moved when you said B and the P respectively. right? That's in English. If you say puppy and baby, you can see that there's pressure on the first letters, B and P. Now, without making the piece of paper move, say the words belle. Belle means beautiful in French, right? The feminine word of beautiful in French, pronounced like the English belle. And papa means dad in French. Try to pronounce those words. Now, if the paper moved, your pronunciation is slightly off, so concentrate and try it again. If the paper didn't move, congratulations, you pronounced the words correctly. So this will be the first video of this course. I hope that you understand now that there's so much a big difference between the alphabet in English and in French. And this is the foundation. And I hope that you will rehearse on this so that we can move forward together in this course. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone, welcome to this next video where we will be talking about the pronunciation, okay, and the punctuation and much more. So without further ado, let's talk about aspirated and non-aspirated H's. So in the French language, the letter H can be aspirated, which we call H aspiré, or non-aspirated, so H non-aspiré, depending on which language the word was borrowed from. What do these terms mean? Example, the word hero, which is hero in English, has an aspirated H because when the definite article le is placed before it, the result is le héros. And both words must be pronounced separately, okay? However, the feminine form of hero is héroïne, is a non-aspirated H, right? Therefore, when you put the definite article in front of it, it becomes l'héroïne and is pronounced as one word. Remember that in the French, as le is never pronounced whether it is aspirated or not aspirated. The only way to tell if the H at the beginning of a word is aspirated is to look it up the dictionary, okay? Some dictionaries will place an asterisk in front of the entry word in the French-English section if the H is aspirated, okay? Other dictionaries will include it in the pronunciation guide after the keyword by placing in apostrophe, okay, before the pronunciation. In short, the words must be memorized, okay? So there are no shortcuts in this case. So on the first left-hand side of the chart, you see that the first H's are aspirated, for example, héros, haïr, or huit, okay? And on the second part of the chart on the right, you see héroïne, habiter, harmonie. So in this case, it is non-aspirated. So one quick exercise that you can try is get a French-English dictionary and find at least 10 aspirated H words and 10 non-aspirated H words. On a piece of paper, write down the words you find in 2 columns, look at it every day, and memorize the columns. All right, so let's now talk about a few pronunciations, right? So here on this small chart at the bottom of the, I would say, page, you see that it is written French vocabulary, okay, with the pronunciation and punctuation. So we have what's called a comma in English, right? A comma in English is called virgule, okay? Parentheses are called accolades, and a tiré, okay, is called a tilde, okay, or tilde, okay? Just keep that in mind. Now, apostrophe is apostrophe, asterisk, okay? So everything here is depicted in French with its proper name. So this is called guillemets, okay? This is called crochet. 2 dots is called tout, 2 points. This is called point virgule, okay? This is called égal. This is called dollar, well, eventually. This is called point d'exclamation, okay? This is called supérieur, inférieur. This is called moins. This is called parentheses or parenthèse, as in English. This is percentage, which is pourcent. So everything here is depicted in French. So if you want to learn the specific word in French and its meaning, all you have to do is look at this chart and you will be fine. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to the next part, which is accents, right? So there are various accents in French, as you can see. This chart depicts every accent that you have to acknowledge and learn. So the first one here is accent aigu, okay? So a word, an example here is elephant, which is éléphant. So the way it is pronounced is éléphant, elephant, éléphant. All right, that is accent aigu, so acute accent. The next one is grave accent, so accent grave. Okay, a few examples we have fièvre, which is fever. We have la terre, we have où, which is where. So it's a grave accent where you're accentuating the letter upon which there is the accent. Okay, and then we have circonflexe, which is accent circonflexe, right? We have gâteau, which is cake. We have être. You can see I'm putting a lot of accent onto the letter, which has the accent circonflexe. It's like I'm making it last for a few more seconds, right? For example, île is island. See, I'm putting a lot of accent on the I, okay? For example, chômage is unemployment, okay? And then we have multiple other examples, and this is something you will see very often. The other one is diaresis, okay, which we also call in French tréma, okay? So another example is Noël, which is Christmas, maïs, which is corn. Okay, we have another one, which is agile, okay, which is acute. Agile, acute. And the other one is called cédille, okay, we say C accent cédille, okay, which is in English called cedilla, and it's simply kind of pronounced as S, okay? So for example, in the word français, we have the accent cédille, which is the small hook underneath the C, and we just pronounce it as a usual S in the English language. Okay, so again, the PDF goes a little bit more in depth, but since I do not want to make these videos very long because this is a French speaking course, I don't want to make this very long. So all you have to do is download the PDF, read, take the time to read, and try to practice with the exercises that are written on my PDF. All right. Now let's move on to the next session. So everything below the chart is just a broad explanation of the accents, but I feel and I assume that you have a pretty much good understanding of the different accents right now. Now, how to use the French accents on the computer, it just depends on the keyboard that you're using, right? Some of them have the French version. If not, then all you have to do is use CTRL plus the letter that you're trying to use, and you'll be able to get the proper accent. All right, so here I've written down a code, a computer code to help you out for those that are typing or are willing to type in the French language. All right, so that will be the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and in the next video, we'll be talking about the different types of greetings. Thank you very much, and see you there. Hi everyone, welcome back to this video. In this section, we will be talking about the different ways to greet in French. All right, so without further ado, let's dive right into it. So, the first thing you have to keep in mind, as in all the other languages, the first thing you have to say to someone is hi, right? Bonjour or good morning or good evening, right? So, here we have an example of a basic conversation between two persons. Okay, the first one is Jacques, and the second one is Marie, like Mary. Okay, so I will be talking in French, okay, and I will be also translating it later on. Okay, so Jacques says bonjour Marie, which is hello Mary. Marie says, tu t'appelles comment? What's your name? Jacques says, me, my name is Jacques. Mary says, ah oui, quoi de neuf, Jacques? Jacques says, pas grand chose, alors au revoir, à demain, Marie. Jacques says, not a big deal. Well, goodbye, see you tomorrow, Mary. Marie replies, see you next time, Jacques. All right. Another conversation between Olivier and Luc is Olivier says salut, which is like hi. Luc replies bonjour, which is good morning or hi as well. Olivier replies tu t'appelles comment, which is what is your name. Luc replies Luc, and you? Olivier replies je suis Olivier, which is I am Olivier. Luc replies ah oui, alors à bientôt Olivier, which is okay, well, see you soon, Olivier. Olivier replies bye, Luc. Okay, so this is a basic conversation. Now let's look into the chart right at the bottom. Okay, so here you have the list of the basic words that you might need to know in order to have a basic conversation and learn how to greet someone in French. So salut is like hi and bye. Okay, bonjour is hello, bonsoir is also hello, bonne soirée is good evening, bonne nuit is good night, quoi de neuf is what's up or what's going on, pas grand chose is not much, okay, or not a big deal. All right, so I highly suggest you to keep an eye on this chart, okay? Try to memorize it if you can, because these are very basic words that you might need to have a basic conversation. All right, so let's move on to the other chart. So here you have salut, which is also hi and bye. You have au revoir, which is goodbye. You have à demain, which is see you tomorrow. Au revoir, à demain is bye, see you tomorrow. À tout à l'heure, which is see you later. À la prochaine is see you tomorrow. À bientôt is see you soon. Ciao is bye. Okay, so these are very common words that are used. Okay, now all you need to do here is just try to rehearse by repeating these words in those charts and you will be fine. Now let's talk about formal speech, right? So what's the difference between vous and tu? Now again, we will be covering the pronouns, so no need to hurry, okay? I just want to tell you the difference between vous and tu. Now vous is you, tu is also you. But what you have to keep in mind is that vous is a professional way of saying you, or I would say a much more respectful way of saying you. For example, if you're talking to a king, or you're talking to your CEO, to your boss, to your father, to your mom, anyone who you have respect for, you will have to use vous in terms of consideration and respect towards that person. Does that make sense? And if you're talking to a child, you're talking to your son, or whatever it might be, you can use tu. All right, so I think it makes sense. And if you need more explanations, then of course you can read through this text. Now, let's talk about courtesy words, right? When you want to be polite, when you want to ask something politely, right? So how do you say please in French? Wait, well, please in French is s'il te plaît or s'il vous plaît. That's please. Thanks a lot is merci beaucoup. All right, so very simple. How do you say you're welcome in French? Well, you can say it by many ways, which is de rien. Okay. Another way is pas de quoi, je t'en prie, or je vous en prie. All right. Now let's talk about titles, right? When you want to add a title to your name, how do you say Mr.? Well, Mr. is monsieur or messieurs. How do you say ma'am? It is madame or mesdames. Okay, and mademoiselle is actually when you're talking about or talking to a young lady. Okay, now, how do you ask for someone's name in French, right? So all you need to say is comment vous appelez-vous? How do you call yourself? Or quel est votre nom? What is your name? Or tu t'appelles comment? What is your name? Je m'appelle, my name is, or je suis, I am. Okay, so very quickly here, we've gone through all these sections, which is a good job. Now let's talk about how to have a simple conversation, right? Because these are the most important things to know. Now, how can you ask someone, how is he going? How was his day, right? So there are multiple ways of saying that or asking that. So for example, when you want to say, how are you in French, you can say, comment allez-vous? Or comment vas-tu? Or comment ça va? Okay, so these are all acceptable ways to say or ask, how are you? If you want to say I am doing very well, all you need to say is ça va très bien or je vais très bien. Now, we will delve into the pronouns, so don't worry about that. For now, all you need to do is just try to memorize these basic sentences. Okay? So if after saying I'm doing very well, ça va très bien, then you can also say oui, ça va. Okay? Or you can also reply as très bien, merci, which is very well, thanks. Or you can say pas mal, which is not bad. Or you can say pas si bien or pas très bien, which is and so well. Très mal, which is very bad. Comme si, comme ça means so. Désolé means sorry. And you is simply et toi or et vous. Okay? Now, here, another example is how do you say au revoir, which is bye. So if you want to say bye, it is au revoir. Okay, so here let's have a look at this conversation. So Michel is Michael. He says, je ne vais pas très bien, right? And then Jack replies, désolé, which is sorry. So I am not feeling well, sorry, right? So these are very straightforward ways of having a basic conversation in French. Let's move on to the next section. So here we'll talk about numbers, right? Which I believe are very important. So we have cardinal numbers. So I will be repeating the numbers after one another, right? So 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, 4 is 4, 5 is 5, 6 is 6, 7 is 7, 8 is 8, 9 is 9, 10 is 10, 11 is 11, 12 is 12, 13 is 13, 14 is 14, 15 is 15, 16 is 16, 17 is 17, 18 is 18, 19 is 19, 20, okay? Careful here, it is 20. It is not 20 or 20, okay? It is 20. I am not pronouncing the G and T at the end. So 20 is 20, 21 is 21, 22, all the way down to 29 will be the same thing as the former numbers, okay? So for example, if you want to say 24 in French, all you need to do is add the 20, which is 20, and then 4, which is 4, so 24, okay? If you want to say 26, 26, it is 26. If you want to say 28, it is 28, okay? 30 is 30, okay? And then 31, and then same thing from 32 to 39. So basically here, to make the job easier, all you need to do is actually memorize the numbers 1 all the way down to 20, okay? And memorize all the other decimal numbers, like 30, which is 30, 40, which is 40, 50 is 50, 60 is 60, 70 is 70, okay? Now, one thing about 70, actually, when you reach 70, instead of saying 71 as 61, you have to use the 11, which is 11. So starting from 71, keep in mind that only for 70, okay, 70 is the exception right here. You cannot say 71 as in English by saying 61. You have to say 71 as if you're saying 70-11, okay? So if, for example, in French, if you want to say 75, basically you'll have to say 70-50. Now, don't ask me why, this is just the way it is, okay? And the exception is only for 70, okay? And for 90 as well. So keep that in mind, very important. And then again, 80 is 80, okay? And that will be all. And now 100 is 100, okay? S-E-N-T, 100. And then 200 is 200. And 1,000 is 1000. 1 million is 1 million. And a billion is 1 milliard. Okay? And I have a bunch of exercises here for you to rehearse. So take your time. You do not need to rush. The numbers are very important. It might take you a week or 2 or a month in order to master these numbers, but trust me, it is worth it. And once you're done mastering the numbers, then you can touch on this exercise right here, where all I'm asking you to do is give me the number in English, in French. All right, so this will be all for this video. I hope that you've learned something, and I'll see you in the next one. Hi everyone, welcome back to this video where we will be talking about the date and other topics which are relevant in the French language. So without further ado, let's start. So, what are the days of the week in French, right? So, Monday is lundi, Tuesday is mardi, Wednesday is mercredi, Thursday is jeudi, Friday is vendredi, Saturday is samedi, and Sunday is dimanche. Dimanche, okay? So you have the pronunciation and the phonetics right in there to help you out with the pronunciation, right? So here are a few examples. At the middle here, you can see aujourd'hui on est quel jour is today is what day, okay? Then you can also say aujourd'hui on est, so today is Monday or Wednesday or whatever. Or tomorrow is what day? You will say demain c'est quel jour? Or tomorrow is demain c'est etc. etc. Right? So not a big deal. Now, what about other ways of saying days or relative days, right? So let's look at this chart right here, right? So the day before yesterday in French is avant-hier, avant-hier. Yesterday is hier. See, I am not pronouncing the H that much, hier. So it is non-aspirable, right? Today is aujourd'hui. Tonight is ce soir. Tomorrow is demain. And the day after tomorrow is après-demain. Now let's have a look at the months of the year. Very important. So January is janvier. February is février. March is mars. April is avril, like April, okay? May is mai, June is juin, okay? July is juillet, August is août, September is September, okay? October is octobre, November, November, and December, Décembre. So you can see from September to December is pretty much the same thing as in English. All you're changing are the two letters, the last two letters. So how do you say what is the date? You have to say quelle est la date d'aujourd'hui. And if you want to say it's this month, all you have to say c'est le mois de, for example, septembre, or c'est le mois de février. So everything is here on this chart, okay? Now, what about the seasons, right? So season in French is la saison because it's a feminine word, and we will talk about how to differentiate between feminine word and masculine words. Okay, in French we have two genders, masculine and feminine words. Spring is le printemps, summer is l'été, automne is l'automne, and winter is l'hiver. Okay, so very simple. All you need to do is print out the PDF and work on these as much as you can. Now let's talk about telling time. So how do you tell the time in French? So how do you say what time is it? All you need to say is quelle heure est-il? Or quelle heure il est? And then you can say it is this time or it is this type of hour. All you have to say is il est, for example, 21 heures, which is 9 p.m., right? So we will talk about this more in depth. So let's have a close look at this chart here. So for example, to say what time is it, all you say is quelle heure est-il? If you want to say it is 1 o'clock, you have to say il est 1 heure. If it's 3 o'clock, you say il est 3 heures. But you have to keep in mind that the French speakers use the 24-hour clock. So not the 12-hour clock, but the 24-hour clock. Okay? That's why, for example, here, if you say it is 14, you will say il est 14 heures. So we go beyond the 12 clock or the 12 type clock. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So, for example, if you want to say it is 25, you can say il est 5 heures moins 20. Now, in this case, what we're doing is, remember, in an hour we have 60 minutes, right? So how do you get 25 in 60 minutes, right? All you do is 45, right, plus 25. That's what gives you 25. So if you want to say this in French, all you need to do is take the subsequent time that it will be, okay, after the 45 remaining minutes and deduct it from the subsequent time. Does that make sense? For example, if I want to say it is 25 or it is 20 to 5, all you need to say is il est 5 heures moins 20. Or if, for example, if you want to say it is 44, then you will say il est 4 heures 40. So before mastering the time, it is compulsory, I would say, to master the numbers. Okay, so if you need more time on mastering the time, please make sure that you master the numbers before focusing on this. Okay, so how do you say it is daybreak? Daybreak in French is le lever du jour, as you can see on this chart. How do you say sunrise in French? It is le lever du soleil. Okay. How do you say the rising sun? It is le soleil levant. Morning is le matin. Okay. AM is du matin. Okay. Yesterday morning is hier matin. Noon, midday is le midi. Afternoon is après-midi. Evening is le soir. Night is la nuit. And sunset is le coucher du soleil. Okay. And here we have a basic conversation, okay, between a director and a person named Daniel. Okay, all you need to do is read through this, okay, try to pronounce, okay, properly. So what I'm going to do here is simply go over the pronunciation, and all you need to do is, if you have a dictionary, take your dictionary, and if there's any word that is still not familiar for you or to you, you can look that up. So someone knocks at the door, right? Entrer, which is enter, and everything is translated here, right? So I will not be translating this. I will just be talking in French for the pronunciation. So, bonjour, monsieur le directeur. Est-ce que vous allez bien? Je vais bien, merci. Et vous, comment allez-vous? Je vais bien. Je veux vous demander s'il est possible d'organiser une fête pour mon anniversaire. Je l'organiserai le 3 mars vers 14 heures. Et vous voulez l'organiser où? Dans la grande salle de réunion au 2e étage. On en aurait besoin jusqu'à 16 heures, le temps de tout nettoyer. Entendu, j'espère que je serai invité. Bien sûr, merci beaucoup. Au revoir et encore merci. All right, so very straightforward. So basically, the remaining pages are a type of rehearsal or review. Okay, so I will not be going over this. This is just for your own benefit in order to review through the PDF. Okay, so here, as you can see, the French alphabet, which was the first video of this course, basic phrases, okay, the numbers, okay, the date and time, and everything else, the seasons, the days of the week, and the months of the year. Okay, so here you have a test. Okay, so how it works in this course is, all you need to do is, if you're really serious about learning French, make sure that you go over these tests. Now, I am your instructor, of course, so if you have any questions, you're finding it difficult for some reason, go ahead and type the question, okay, in the commentary section, and I will be more than happy to help you out. Okay, so this is lesson 0, which is a test, the first test. So, for example, here, I'm asking you to translate the following phrases and sentences into French, okay? So what day is today? You can try that because we've covered all of these words over the charts, okay? And all of the other exercises are also very valuable, okay? And that will be all for today, okay? Now, after this, we'll be talking about the basic grammar, we will talk about the gender of nouns, the different pronouns, and much more. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Hi everyone, welcome back to this video. We will be talking about the basic grammars, okay? We will differentiate between the different gender of nouns in French. All right, so without further ado, let's start. So you have to keep in mind that in French, we have 2 different nouns, masculine nouns and feminine nouns. Now, anytime you encounter a masculine noun, you will be using le. And anytime you're encountering or you encountered a feminine word or noun, you will be using la. Very simple. Le for masculine words, la for feminine words. Now, there is a question. You might be asking, but how will I know if the noun is a feminine or masculine word? Now, the answer is very astonishing, but it is the reality. There is no way, there is no hint, direct hint to know if it is a masculine or feminine word. Okay, now the only thing that you can do, or amongst the things you can do, is actually to read as much as you can in French. Okay, any type of book, PDF, journal, or listen to the radio, watch TV news in French in order to familiarize yourself and start differentiating between these different types of nouns. Okay, so for example, a horse, right? The horse, we say le cheval. The dog, we say le chien. The book is le livre. The noise is le bruit. Okay. Now, if we look at here, the dove, it is la colombe. The shirt, it is la chemise. The house, it is la maison. Liberty is la liberté. Okay. And you also have different types of nouns on the right side as well. Okay. Now, this is what makes French much more difficult than English, right? Because you always have to be careful in regards to the type of gender of the noun, right? But again, as long as you keep practicing, it's going to make sense later on, okay? So even if you make these mistakes as a French learner, do not feel embarrassed, okay? Because even French speaking learners or even native French speakers also make these types of mistakes. Behold, myself, sometimes I make these mistakes, okay? So it is totally normal, okay, to make these mistakes. The only thing is just to keep on learning and not to make it a repetition, okay? So let's have a look down here. So again, here, let's have a look. For example, feminine, as I said, we use la, la, and masculine, we use le. Now, of course, there are some words that are very straightforward. For example, we know that a daughter is a feminine gender, right? So you will not be using le for your daughter. So that's why we say la fille instead of le fille. Does that make sense, right? So, for example, the son, I know that a son has to be a masculine gender, so I have to use le. But for example, when you say the child, well, we don't know. The child can be a daughter or a son. It can be a boy or a girl. So that's why here it is, I would say, singular. But since it starts with a vowel, you can see enfant is child, enfant starts with an E, then that's why I have to add a L apostrophe, as you can see here on my cursor, right? So anytime you have a noun in French that starts with a vowel, you have to add a L apostrophe, okay? So you will disregard the A or the E, but you will simply add the L apostrophe. Does that make sense? And when it's plural, again, they made it easier for us so that you don't need to keep in mind or to to care if it is a masculine or feminine word. All you need to do is just add les, which is the in the plural form. Okay, and here at the middle you have the pronunciation. Okay, so le fils, les fils, un fils, des fils. Okay, now one thing you have to keep in mind is also un, which is one or a. But if it is a feminine noun, then instead of saying un, you will say une. So you will add a e at the end of un. Does that make sense? So very pretty straightforward. Okay, let's have a look here. So here, as you can see, ami is friend in French. Okay, and here, as you can see, ami starts with a vowel, which is a, right? So I'll definitely have to add a L apostrophe in front of this noun in order to make or build a proper sentence. So here I will say l'ami, okay, L apostrophe, or for example, for élève, which is E, starts with E, which is a vowel, I will have to add a L apostrophe. H, in this case, is H, right? I will have to add a L apostrophe, okay? So here again, we have a look at la liaison. Okay, so liaison is simply when you have to kind of make the words go along together, right? So for example, some words, okay, are pronounced differently when they are together. For example, if I say les amis, it is grammatically correct, but in terms of the pronunciation, it is not. Why? Because in reality, we say les amis, amis. It's like there's a Z here. As you can see here, there's a Z. Why is that the case? Simply because whenever you have S that is followed by a vowel, then the pronunciation becomes as a Z. Okay, so I will not say les amis, but I will say les amis. Okay, les amis. You will add a or I will say imaginable Z here for the pronunciation. All right, so now let's have a look at this. For example, note that words like DES, which is de, or LES, les, are used in French before plural nouns. Okay, so these are the plural terms that you have to use or prepositions that you have to use for any noun that are plural. Okay, any nouns that are plural, you'll have to use LES or DES. Okay, very straightforward. Now, what about people, right? So, for example, la personne, a person is normally a neutral gender, but in reality in French we say la personne. So we consider a person to naturally be a feminine person. Okay? Now, l'homme is a man, a woman is la femme, a boy is le garçon, girl is la fille, little girl is la fillette, okay? Male friend is ami or copain, and female friend is la copine. Okay, and then here we have different expressions. So for example, how do you say what is it? In French, we say qu'est-ce que c'est. So you will see this very often. Okay, qu'est-ce que c'est? Qu'est-ce que c'est is what is it? So if you want to ask something about anything, you can just say qu'est-ce que c'est? And that means what is it? What is it? Okay? And for example, it's a book, c'est un livre, or it's a dog, c'est un chien. All right, il y a and et voici voilà. So, il y a une pomme, there is an apple. Il y a des pommes, there are apples. Okay, so you can see the difference between une and des. Des, why? Because here we use apples, not one apple. So, since this is a plural noun, I have to use des. Okay, very straightforward. And that'll be all for this video. In the next video, we will be talking about the verb to be, which is very imperative because this is a very oftenly used word when you want to conjugate in French and speak in French. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you there. Welcome back, everyone. And in this lesson, we'll be talking about how to ask where a person is from. It can be a country, it can be a place, it can be from a particular area, whatsoever. This is how you ask a person where he or she is from in French. So here on the first page, you'll see the first chart where it is said that Quentin is having a conversation with Leon. So Quentin goes and asks Leon, Bonjour Leon, dis donc tu es d'où? Which means, hi Leon, tell me, where are you from? Leon responds or answers, Je suis de Paris, Quentin, which means I am from Paris, Quentin, which is a city or a neighborhood in Paris. The conversation goes along. Leon responds, Quentin, alors tu es français? So are you French? Leon says, yes, exactly. Et Marie, elle est d'où? What about Mary? Where is she from? Elle est de Marseille. Elle est française aussi. She is from Marseille, which is a beautiful city in France. She is also French. Quentin finishes off the conversation by saying, Merci, Léon, au revoir. Thank you, Leon. Bye. So you can see on this chart, we have the different pronouns, which are imperative in any type of language that you're trying to learn, right? So here, you have to know that I in French is je. Careful with the pronunciation. It is not je, it is not je, it is je. All right, je. Which also can mean game if a person is saying je, because games in French is also pronounced as je, all right? Which is, keep in mind, je means I, okay? Me, I, all right? What about we? We in French is nous, all right? As you can see on my cursor. You is tu or vous, depending on the professionalism and the level of respect that you want to donate, I would say, or establish in your conversation. He, she, and one is respectively il, elle, and on. All right, so he is il, she is elle, and one is on. Okay, and again, lastly, we have they, which is in French ils ou elles. Now, very careful here. For they, you will not be pronouncing the last S, okay? So you will simply be saying il or elle without saying S at the end, okay? So it is pronounced exactly the same way as il ou elle in the singular form or mode. However, the S will only be important, I would say, when you're writing a letter or you're writing a text to make sure that you're saying they instead of he or she. All right, does that make sense? So if you have any questions, feel free to type them on the commentary section. Now, let's talk about verbs, right? So introduction to verbs. Now, verbs are extremely imperative in any type of language, right? Whether you're learning Arabic, Italian, whatever, verbs are important. Without verbs, you cannot precisely communicate. So here we'll focus on infinitives. So the infinitive form is the basic form of a verb, okay? It does not refer to a particular tense, person, or subject. In this book, the infinitive form of the verb is used to identify it. In English, the infinitive form is to, for example, to eat, to dress, to drive. Any verb that starts with to in English is already in its infinitive form. However, in French, the infinitive is one word. For example, parler translates to speak. So we will not add to onto the verbs in French in their infinitive forms, okay? Finir translates to finish, and aller translates to go, all right? And throughout this book, we'll also cover some conjugation in the present tense, past tense, future tense as well. So to begin with, let's start with one of the most imperative verbs, which is être, which is to be, okay? So here we are decorticating the verb être, to be, in French, in the present tense, okay? So I will start off with the first pronoun, which is je, which is I am. As you can see, I've written down the translation here for you. So je suis is je suis. As you can see, the phonetics are also here available in order for you to make sure that you pronounce them correctly. So I will just be reciting these, okay? And you can repeat after me and pause as you wish. So here as we start, it is je suis, which is I am. Tu es, you are, il est, he is, elle est, she is, on est, one is. Vous êtes, you are, nous sommes, we are, ils sont, they are, elles sont, they are when you're talking about a feminine individual. All right, so this is something that you might need to spend a lot of more time on because, again, this might be new information. So feel free to spend as much time as you wish on this chart in order to master the conjugation of the verb to be. Why am I accentuating this? Is because être is, I would say, unavoidable. You have to use être when you're speaking, just like when you use the verb to be in English, right? So this is very important alongside the verb to have, which we'll also cover in this book. All right, so here I have a few idioms. So I have ça y est, which is I've done it, finish. J'y suis, which means I get it. Vous y êtes, are you ready? All right. Now, what about expressing agreement, right? So tu es d'accord ou pas? You are of agreement or not? Okay. Now let's talk about cities and nationalities. To say what city you're from, you use the preposition de. So, for example, if you want to say I am from Paris, you will say il est de Paris. All right, so I added the preposition de. All right. When stating your nationality or job, it is necessary to include the article. This is an exception to the normal rule. So, for example, if you want to say I am Australian, you will say je suis australien. Now, depending on the gender of the person, you will either use il for masculine or elle for feminine. As you can see in this example, il est australien, he is an Australian. Elle est australienne, and I added a double NE at the end of Australian to depict, okay, the feminine version of Australian. Okay, and here I have a checkbox to check your understanding, so feel free to do so. Now let's talk about descriptions, right? So when you want to describe words, you use adjectives, right? So just like articles, French adjectives also have to match the nouns that they modify in gender and plurality. So most adjective changes occur in the following manner. Feminine, you have to add an I to the masculine form. So un garçon intéressant, une fille intéressante. So you can see I added an I at the end of interesting, intéressant, because une fille is a feminine word. So you will have to add I, all right, onto the masculine form when you're dealing with a feminine noun. All right, now when in regards to the plural form, it is pretty much the same thing, but when you're dealing with the feminine version, of course, you will add the E and then the S at the end. All right, so pretty simple here. For the pronunciation, again, I've written down an example. So for example, masculine pronunciation is going to be intéressant, amusant. But if it's the feminine pronunciation, well, you have to accentuate, I would say, the last letter, which in this case is going to be intéressante. So you can see here I am putting a lot of pressure, I would say, onto the last letter, which is T. But for the masculine version, I am not pronouncing the T. Does that make sense? So pretty easy here. So let's talk about a few adjectives that you might use in order to describe people. For example, here, il est petit, which means he is small, okay, or short. Il est moyen, he is average. Il est grand, he is big. Il est gros, he is fat or obese, or big, whatever you want. Here, elle est petite, elle est moyenne, elle est grande, elle est grosse. So in this case, all these two columns here are the masculine version on the left and the feminine version on the right, okay? And here on the right extreme corner, these are examples of plural forms, as you can see. All right. So here again, we have a few adjectives pertaining to the hair color. For example, she is blonde, or il est blanc, okay? Il est brun, okay? Elle est intelligente, she is intelligent. Il est intéressant, he is interesting. Il est amusant, he is funny. So these are really good adjectives, but don't worry about these words because I have in this course included multiple resources for you to learn different verbs and different adjectives, okay? Now here, I also included many adjectives here, very common adjectives. So sympathique means nice, amusant, funny, intelligent, intelligent, intéressant, interesting, patient, patient, sociable, sociable, timide, timid, or shy, dynamique, outgoing, gentil, nice or gentle, strict, strict, fort, strong. Okay, here for actions you have bon or bon, which is good, mauvais or mauvaise, which is bad. Okay, difficulty, I have easy, which is facile, difficult, difficile. And you have pretty much a good list of adjectives, so you might want to memorize some of these in order to become more proficient in French. All right, and also on the top, at the bottom here, I have colors. Okay, so here is just a list of colors in French, so you might want to know these as well. Very important. So for example, white is blanc, gray is gris, red is rouge, etc., etc. And here at the end, I have a section of adverbs expressing degree, right? So for example, assez means rather or enough. Très is something you'll also hear a lot in French, which is very. So for example, he is very intelligent. Il est très intelligent. vraiment, which is truly or really. All right, so pretty straightforward. Now let's talk about family, right? So family is also important because I believe that you have a family and you might want to talk with your family in French. So here, for example, here is the verb to have, right? So for example, if you want to say I have an uncle, I have a nephew, you will have to use the verb avoir. So here, this is the verb avoir, to have in French in the present tense. So I'll start here from the first pronoun, which is j'ai, which is I have, tu as, you have, il a, he has, elle a, she has, on a, one has, nous avons, we have, vous avez, you have, ils ont, they have, elles ont, they have. All right. So for example, here I have j'ai deux stylos, which is I have two pens. Tu as trois frères, you have three brothers. Il a une idée, he has an idea. All right. So you might want to spend a little bit more time, as you should have, with the previous chart pertaining to the verb être, to be. And here I have multiple nouns of the family members. So les parents are parents, mother la mère, father le père, wife la femme, husband le mari, sister la sœur, brother le frère, child l'enfant, children les enfants, daughter la fille, son le fils, stepmother la belle-mère, stepfather le beau-père. All right. And again, on the right side, we have grandmothers all the way down to half brothers. So feel free to spend as much time and also download the PDF and use this PDF as you wish. Here, we talk about the direct object pronouns, so le, la, and la. So le is used for masculine singular direct object. La is for feminine singular direct object. L'apostrophe is actually when it is placed in front of a word that starts with a vowel, and la is for the plural nouns. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Now let's talk about recreation, right? So for example, you have your child who's at school, and during the break, he might be playing in the park or wherever. You might want to use recreational words. So here, for example, you have je, okay? I, tu, il ou elle, we, you, and they. Okay, now the ending of the verb jouer, which is to play in this case, will be as follows. So je joue. Now pay very careful, pay attention very carefully to the, or at the ending, okay? Pay attention to the ending of the verb here. So you can see for je, the verb will end with e. Now, this is always pretty much the same for verbs that end with er, okay? So jouer is to play, but you can see it ends with er, right? So you will see that in French, there are three main types of verbs. You have verbs of the first group, verbs of the second group, and verbs of the third group. This is a verb of the first group because it ends with er, okay? Verbs of the second group end with ir, and for the third group, some of them end with OIR, and some others with different have different endings, but we will talk about these later on. Okay, but for now, just keep in mind jouer is a verb of the first group, and all of the verbs of the first group pretty much will end with these same terminations. Okay, so je joue, tu joues, il joue, nous jouons, vous jouez, il joue. Okay, so you will definitely have to memorize these terminations in order to become proficient in French. All right, now here is another verb, which is parler, which is to speak. Okay, so je parle, tu parles, il parle, nous parlons, vous parlez, il parle. Okay, here we have j'habite, which is to live, j'habite, tu habites, il habite, nous habitons, vous habitez, ils habitent. Or the verb écouter, which is to listen. J'écoute, tu écoutes, il écoute, nous écoutons, vous écoutez, ils écoutent. All right, so try to practice as much as you can on these verbs. So I'm not going to talk about this because again, this is just a repetition, just some additional practice for you to practice on. Okay, and at the end here, you can see that I've added a few recreational verbs. So jouer, to play, to finish, finish, finir, to wait, attendre, aimer, to like, etc., etc. All right, détester is to hate, my friend, mon ami. All right, now here in this chart, I have a few places, right? So library, park, swimming pool, beach, restaurant, concert hall, stadium, and theater in French. So we have la bibliothèque, le parc, la piscine, la plage, le restaurant, salle de concert, le stade, le théâtre. Okay, so these are places that you might want to be familiar with in order to become more proficient in French. All right, indirect object pronoun lui and leur. Now, indirect objects or prepositional places with the object of the preposition. Indirect object is a noun that receives the action of a verb. So, for example, il jette la balle à Jacques, which means he throws the ball to Jack. Il jette la balle à Marie. He throws the ball to Mary. Il jette la balle à Jacques et Marie. He throws the ball to Jack and Mary. So lui and leur are indirect object pronouns. They replace nouns referring to people and means him or her and to them respectively. So lui replaces a singular masculine or feminine, so it doesn't matter of the gender, and leur replaces a plural masculine or feminine indirect object referring to a human. So an example follows, for example, il lui jette la balle, he throws the ball to him. Il lui jette la balle, he throws the ball to her, right? You don't need to ensure what type of gender it is in regards to lui. And leur is used for the plural form. Il leur jette la balle, he throws the ball to them. All right. So here we have the verb jouer. So you can play many type of sports, as you know. You can play basketball, football, tennis. So here are all the words in French and some of the musical instruments as well that I've added here. So violin, guitar, piano, etc., etc. Now let's talk about the house, right? So you definitely live somewhere and you have objects in your house, right? So you want to also get familiar with the objects surrounding you in your house. So I'm not going to go over all of this. As you can see, it is pretty lengthy, but it is I would say crowded, or it's full of multiple words that you might want to know, right? For example, what is kitchen in English? In French, it is la cuisine, right? What is dining room? La salle à manger, right? Garage, le garage. Water, restroom, les toilettes. So these are just words that you might want to acknowledge and memorize, okay, for your own convenience. Now let's talk about the verb faire, okay? So faire is to do. So here I am conjugating the verb faire, to do, in the present in the present tense. So je fais, I do. Tu fais, you do. Il fait, he does. Elle fait, she does. On fait, one does. Nous faisons, we do. Vous faites, you do. Ils font, they do. Elles font, they do. Okay, so you might want also to practice on this as well. These are verbs that you might be using while doing any type of housework. Okay, for example, to make the bed, we say faire le lit. To do the housework, faire le ménage. To do the dishes, faire la vaisselle. So these are pretty much very important as well. So you might want to spend as much time on these. Okay. Now let's talk about direct object replacement. So for example, if you want to say he sees me, then you'll have to use the verb to see, which is voir in French. So it means il me voit. Okay, so keep in mind that these are indirect object pronouns. So me to me is me, to you or you to you or you is te, us or to us is nous, vous is you or to you. Okay, so you might also want to, you might need to memorize these as well. And these are exercises for you to practice on at your own convenience. So this will be the end of this video. I hope that you've learned a lot. I hope that you will be spending some time on the previous charts in order to master them at your convenience. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Welcome back, everyone. And in this video, we will be talking about school-related words in French. All right. So in this chart, as you can see, I have enlisted very commonly used words in French pertaining to schools. So for example, teacher is le professeur, scholarship la bourse, diploma le diplôme, and you have a bunch of words here. Okay, so feel free, again, once again, to have a look at this chart, and you also have the different classes and grades in French. So for example, fifth grade is CM2, right? Fourth grade CM1, okay? Now, it might be not important for some of you, but for those that are interested, for example, for those that are professors, you might be interested on this list. Okay, let's talk about other school supplies, for example. So chalk is la craie, the board, le tableau, pen, le stylo, pencil, le crayon, calculator, la calculatrice, book, le livre or le bouquin, notebook, le cahier, etc., etc. So yeah, as you can see, there are a bunch of words here, and this is a very good chart, I believe, for anyone who is trying to learn French and trying to express him or herself at school. So what about words pertaining to writing and reading, right? So for the verb to write, or I would say écrire in French, this is how you conjugate it in the present. So it is j'écris, I write. Tu écris, you write. Il écrit, he writes. Elle écrit, she writes. On écrit, one writes. Nous écrivons, we write. Vous écrivez, you write. Ils écrivent, they write. Elles écrivent, they write in the feminine version. And then here at the bottom, you have the verb read. Je lis, I read. Tu lis, you read. Il le lit. As you can see, there's a T at the end here, but I am not pronouncing it. Okay, so it is just il lit. I am not pronouncing the T, which is he reads. Elle lit, she reads. On lit, one reads. Nous lisons, we read. Vous lisez, you read. Ils lisent, they read. Elles lisent, they read in the feminine version. Okay, and here you also have a few school subjects or topics. So for those interested, you might want to have a look at it as well. What about the past tense, right? So the passé composé is the perfect tense and is therefore composed of an auxiliary verb and a past participle, with most verbs that auxiliary verb is avoir. All right, so the basic formation for the verb avoir is I have, which is j'ai, you have, tu as, he has, il a, nous avons, we have, vous avez, you have, ils ont, they have. Okay, so this is the past tense. Okay, so whenever you're talking in the past with the verb to have, this is how you should conjugate the verb. Okay, so you might want again to spend a lot of time on this after memorizing and mastering the present tense. Okay, no need to rush here. So for the termination of these verbs in the past participle, past tense, this is how it works. So for the verbs that end with er, you will add a e accent aigu, okay? For the verbs that end with ir, you will add a I, simply an I at the end. And then for verbs that end with re, you will add a u. Okay, so irregular verbs varies but must be memorized. Okay, so there are no shortcuts in this case, and I've added additional examples below. Okay, so and here you have an exercise, okay, exercises that you can work on for practice. Now let's talk about culture, right? Culture related words in French. So for example, here we have the verb to speak and the verb to finish and the verb to sell. So I'm not going to go over this as we've covered this already so far in the present tense. So you can have a look at this chart, pause it, and try to spend some time on it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comment section below. Okay? Now, common RE verbs, as we covered, are, for example, to wait or to answer, attendre, or répondre. Okay? And if we look at other verbs of the third group, like for example, croire and voir, as you can see, they all end with O, I, R. Okay, now let's talk about these ones because I believe they might be a little bit harder to pronounce and to conjugate. So for example, the verb to believe is croire. So how would you say I believe in French? It is je crois, you believe, tu crois, he believes, il croit, she believes, elle croit, on croit, one believes. Nous croyons, we believe, vous croyez, you believe in a polite way. Ils croient, they believe, masculine. Elles croient, they believe, feminine. Okay? And then at the below, I have the verb vendre. So this is something you can try on your own, and you also have the phonetics as well. Now let's talk about religion. I love religion, right? I love religion. So let's talk about religion. So here, well, how do you say religion in French? La religion. Christianity, le christianisme. L'islam for Muslims, right? L'islam, Islam. Judaism for Jews. Christian, le chrétien. How do you say a Christian? Chrétien. How do you say a Muslim? A musulman. Musulman. If it's a woman, musulmane. Okay, you can see that you add a E at the end of musulman. Jew, you say le juif. If it's a feminine person, then la juive. So you can see that the F was transformed into a V and E. Okay, and how do you say atheist? Athée. Okay, so pretty simple here, straightforward. What about birthdays, right? So how do you say how old are you? Tu as quel âge? Simple as that. How do you say a cake? Le gâteau, gift, le cadeau, candle, la bougie, party, la fête, to invite, inviter, to throw a party, donner une fête, etc. How do you say husband? Le mari. How do you say wife? La femme. And at the bottom below, I have a few holidays, which might be important for some, not important for others. So feel free to consult the chart as you wish. Let's talk about shopping for women, for girls, for example. How do you say to go shopping? Faire des courses. To go grocery shopping, faire le marché. Okay, how do you say store? It is le magasin. Okay, how do you say mall? Le centre commercial, like a commercial center, right? Shopping center. Département, le rayon. Small store, la boutique. Pharmacy, la pharmacie. Okay, so for example, how do you say how much is it? C'est combien? Or for example, how cost or how much does it cost? Ça coûte combien? Okay, how do you say bakery? La boulangerie. Dairy store, la crèmerie. Pastry store, pâtisserie, etc., etc. So it's a really broad list, as you can see. And I know it might take a little bit of time in order to master all of these, which you might not want at the moment, but just feel free again to spend as much time as you want on this chart. And I think we covered already direct objects and indirect objects, but let's talk about them again in a different angle or from a different perspective. So while the subject of a sentence initiates an action, the direct object is the one that is affected by the action. A direct object pronoun is used to refer to the direct object of a previous sentence. So for example, when I say Pierre voit le cambrioleur, it means Pierre sees the burglar. Or for example, Pierre le voit, Pierre sees him. So for example, the following table shows the various types of direct object pronouns. So for example, me, te, t apostrophe, l apostrophe, nous, vous, les. So here you have also the translations just in case you want to know what they mean. And you can read same thing for indirect objects, okay? So for an indirect object, it is called indirect because it occurs usually together with the direct object which is affected directly by the action. Okay? So here you can see pretty much the same thing here as direct objects. This is the verb acheter, which is to buy. As you can see, this is in the present tense, so feel free to rehearse on this one as well to further your understanding of the conjugation of verbs. Here also I have a few verbs pertaining to shopping, right? So for example, to weigh, which is peser, to carry out, mener, to take along, emmener, to bring, amener, to overwork, surmener, to raise, lever, to raise, soulever. And below I have a few words pertaining to clothing, okay? So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. The chart is for you. You bought this course in order to learn a lot and as many words as you can. So feel free to look at the chart as much as you wish. All right, and again here, this is a verb of the first group, which is payer, which is to pay. Again, not a big deal. Okay, pretty much the same thing. And you also have additional verbs at the bottom here. And this is a practice conversation, okay? So in this case, all you might want to do is just go ahead and speak out loud and practice on this conversation, okay? So I will leave the second part, okay? Now I can do for the first part, and I will ask you to go ahead and try the second part. So for the first part, we're talking about the bakery. So we have two persons, Bernard and Camille. Bernard says bonjour madame. Camille says bonjour monsieur. Bernard says que voulez-vous? What do you want? Camille replies je voudrais acheter une baguette s'il vous plaît. I would like to pay a bread. I would please like to pay a bread. Bernard, ça sera tout? Will that be all? Camille, non, je voudrais deux croissants aussi. No, I would like two croissants aussi, or colache, whatever you call it. And Bernard says, très bien, ça fait 2 € s'il vous plaît. Bernard replies, perfect or good. It is 2 € or it costs us 2 € please. Camille gives him the money and says, thank you, merci beaucoup. So you can see this is a very basic practice conversation. So please go ahead and try the second part here at the market. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the comment section. Now, this is lesson 2.04. We'll be talking about going out, right? So going out. So a and de, as you can see, are prepositions that we've covered. So I'm not going to spend too much time on these. Now, leisure activities, right? So this is also a list of multiple leisure activities that you might be involved in. So you can have a look at this very straightforward chart, okay? And here you have the verb partir and sortir, which are two verbs of the second group in the present tense. Movies, okay, again, for those that are movie lovers, you have a chart pertaining to movies, so feel free to have a look at it as you wish. The verb venir, which is to come, okay, which is a verb of the second group. And you can see this is the conjugation. So for example, how do you say I come? Je viens. You come, tu viens. He comes, il vient. She comes, elle vient. On vient, one comes. Nous venons, we come. Vous venez, you come. Ils viennent, they come. Elles viennent, they come in the feminine version. All right, so revenir to come back, devenir to become, appartenir to belong, contenir to contain, etc. As you can see, there's lots of verbs, okay? So really, I want you to pay close attention to the pace, okay? My goal is not to rush, okay? So if you need more time, pause the videos, download the PDFs, and ask me any questions that you may have along this course or throughout this course. All right, and in this section, we are talking about verbs that end with E accent aigu, X-E-R, exe. So for example, the verb exercer, all right? But again, in this case, it is not a commonly termination of verbs in French, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But as you can see here, we have the verb to suggest, which is suggérer. So how do you say I suggest? It is je suggère. And the same thing all the way down to elle suggère, they suggest. Okay, here at the bottom, you have multiple verbs that end with er. Okay, so for example, to accelerate, accélérer, to celebrate, célébrer, espérer, to hope, oblitérer, to obliterate, préférer, to prefer, sécher, to dry, etc. Okay, and at the below, I have multiple examples of directions that you might also want to be familiar with. Let's talk about transportation, right? Because transportation is also very important. How do you say I drive? Well, driving means conduire in French. So, je conduis, I drive. Tu conduis, you drive. Il conduit, he drives. Elle conduit, again, you can see that I'm not pronouncing the T. Okay, on conduit, one drives. Nous conduisons, we drive. Vous conduisez, you drive. Ils conduisent, they drive. Elles conduisent, they drive in the feminine version. And I also have additional verbs here: to produce, produire, to translate, traduire, to reduce, réduire. Okay, to open, ouvrir, to close, fermer. Okay, so pretty easy and straightforward. Here I have multiple verbs. Okay, verb exceptions with I or R. okay, R-I-R, okay, so for example, to run, je cours, tu cours, il court, nous courons, vous courez, il court. Okay, and the past participle is couru. So for example, if you want to say I have ran, j'ai couru. So this is the verb in its past participle. Okay, and pretty much the same thing for any verb that ends with ir. Okay, so keep that in mind. And additional examples, as you can see at the bottom. So feel free to practice and rehearse on your pronunciation. Now, this is a list of verbs. Now, I want you to pay a lot of attention on this chart because you want to know a few verbs, right? Because without verbs, you cannot properly express yourself. So please feel free to spend a lot of time on this chart, okay? I have added a lot of verbs that are very frequently used, okay? So for example, the verb to go, aller, the verb to come, venir, to arrive, arriver, to go, partir, rester, to leave or to stay. Okay, so pretty much a whole bunch of lists that are very important, okay? Now, I have a good mnemonic here for you guys. So the verbs that can take the verb to be, être, can be easily remembered by the acronym Mrs. Dr. Van der Tramp. Okay, and here you have the different verbs that will go along with the verb to be. Okay, so for example, monter, rester, sortir, devenu, revenu, venu, arrivé, né, descendu, entrer, rentrer, tomber, retourner, aller, mort, et parti. Okay, so these are verbs that are always connected with the verb to be and never with the verb to have. Okay, so moreover, all the pronominal verbs like se cacher or se demander, to wonder, are always conjugated with the verb to be, être. Okay, so keep that in mind, and I've added additional examples here below. Subject and past participle agreement. So when conjugating with être, the past participle of the above verbs must agree with the subject of a sentence in gender and plurality, okay? Note that there is no agreement if these verbs are conjugated with the verb avoir. So if the subject is masculine singular, there is no change in the past participle. If the subject is feminine singular and E is added to the past participle, if the subject is masculine plural and S is added to the past participle, and if the subject is feminine plural and ES is added to the past participle. So here I've added a few examples. So je suis allé, you can see that if it is a feminine person, right, then you will add a double E at the end. If it is a masculine person, then you'll just add the E accent aigu. And it is the case for all the remaining verbs. Now the pronoun Y, indirect object pronouns like, for example, to it or to them. So this is also another example, but not very important, I would say. Okay, and I added a few idioms that you might want to know as well. Now, let's talk about everyday life, right? So, everyday life, what are you doing? Like you sleep, you eat, right? So, these are verbs that you might also want to know and learn. So, se lever, to get up, se laver, to wash, to shave, se raser, to shower, se doucher, se baigner, to bath, se brosser, to brush your teeth, se peigner les cheveux, to comb your hair, s'habiller, to dress oneself, etc. So, please feel free to practice on these examples below. Now, reflexive verbs, for example, I wash myself, is je me lave. So in this case, you will be using possessive pronouns as we've covered in the previous videos. So these are examples for you to practice on as well. Okay, below I have going to work. Okay, so things that you might be doing at work. So to work in French is travailler. Okay, travailler, to work. And travailler pour means to work for, okay? And below I have the verb do or to have or to owe in the present tense. So je dois, I have to, tu dois, you have to, il doit, he has to, elle doit, she has to, on doit, one has to, nous devons, we have to, vous devez, you have to, ils doivent, they have to, and elles doivent, they have to in the feminine version. So falloir, to be necessary, il faut, it is necessary, il a fallu, it was necessary, il fallait, it was necessary. Okay, il faudra, it will be necessary. Il faudrait, it would be necessary. Okay, so this is also important. What about rural life? Now, again, this is something that might not be very important for some of you. So feel free to spend as much time as you wish on these charts. Here I have the verb to follow, which is suivre, okay, suivre or suivi in the past participle. Okay, here I have the verb to live. Okay, so je vis, I live, tu vis, you live, etc. And here I also have the verb to be born, which means je nais, tu nais, il naît, elle naît. Nous naissons, we are born. Vous naissez, you are born. Ils naissent, they are born. And elles naissent, they are born in the feminine version. Okay, so we have reflexive verbs, reciprocal verbs, and naturally pronominal verbs or pronominal verbs. Okay, so here, for example, if we look at the reflexive verbs, again, you will be using possessive pronouns. Okay, so for example, elle s'est lavée, she washed herself. Nous nous sommes lavés, we washed ourselves. Elle s'est lavé les mains, she washed her hands. Nous nous sommes lavé les mains, we wash our hands. Okay? And same thing for reciprocal verbs, naturally pronominal verbs. You will also be using possessive pronouns. Food and drink, right? So who doesn't like food? Who doesn't like good drinks, right? So here I have a list of food that you might also want to spend some time on. So fruits and vegetables like banana, cherry, lemon, strawberry, apple, tomato, onion, everything here. So a very decent list of food nouns that you might want to accustom yourself with. And the list goes on, as you can see, a very broad list. So I will not, for the sake of time, I will not be going over these, but feel free to ask me any question. But let me just name a few. So for example, beef is le bœuf, chicken le poulet, pork le porc, turkey la dinde, chocolate le chocolat, and cake le gâteau, ice cream la glace, etc., etc. And same thing for juices, okay? Coffee le café, beer la bière, lemon soda, la limonade, okay, orange juice, le jus d'orange. So keep in mind, juice in French is jus, okay. So basically, juice in French is le jus. There's a S at the end, but I am not pronouncing the S. So it is simply le jus, not le jus, okay. So just keep that in mind. And at the bottom here, I have a few examples of portative articles. So I like ice cream, j'aime la glace. We prefer steak, nous préférons le steak. You like French fries, vous aimez les frites. So French fries in French is simply frites. Okay, you will not say frites françaises. You will just say frites, even though French fries were invented in France, which is why we call them French fries in English. Okay, so keep that in mind. So keep this in mind as well. This is another preposition that is used for countries, okay, or any type of verb that pertains to, for example, um, eating or playing something, okay? So for example, non, je n'en joue pas. Tu joues du piano? Non, je n'en joue pas. Do you play piano? No, I don't play. Okay, so anytime you're talking about an action, okay, like playing, okay, I would say any type of verb in action, you can use en in order to replace the verb. So for example, vous prenez du poisson? Oui, j'en prends. So en here represents the fish. Are you having fish? Yes, I'm having some. Vous avez commandé de l'eau? Oui, nous en avons commandé. Did you order some water? Yes, we ordered some. Okay, and here at the bottom, I have the verb mettre, which is to put. And again, how do you pronounce it? It is je mets. Okay, I put, tu mets, you put, all the way down to elles mettent, they put. Okay, and here we have related words like mettre, permettre, remettre, remettre en place, and soumettre. And as well, I've added a few idioms and related expressions for your own benefit. So thank you so much for attending this video and watching it. I hope that you've learned pretty much a lot so far. If not, please let me know how you view this course so far, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much. Hi everyone, welcome to this next video in which we'll be talking about the weather, right? This is also a very important topic to understand and learn how to relate and describe the weather in French. So, before we do that, we have to discuss about the formation and rules pertaining to the standard negation. Okay, so simple negation is done by wrapping ne pas around the verb. So see these two words, ne pas, is very important because these are the two terms that you will have to use or utilize, I would say, in order to express your negation. For example, if you say, I do not steal, well, you will have to add ne and pas in between the verb. Okay, so steal is voler en français. Okay, in French. So if you want to say I do not steal, you have to add voler, which is to steal, right in the middle in between ne and pas. Does that make sense? Now, if it's in the perfect tense, then ne pas wraps around the auxiliary verb, not the participle. So if you want to say, for example, I have not stolen, then it would be je n'ai pas volé. Okay, now again, this might be a little bit complicated because we still haven't covered the other tenses, but this is just for explanation purposes. All right, so let's look at this chart right here. Okay, so here I have negation examples. Okay, for example, he is a lawyer, il est avocat. He is not a lawyer, il n'est pas avocat. We are doing our homework, nous faisons nos devoirs, nous ne faisons pas nos devoirs, we are not doing our homework. Je joue du piano, I play the piano. Je ne joue pas du piano, I do not play the piano. Vous vendez votre voiture, you sell your car. Vous ne vendez pas votre voiture, you do not sell your car. So you see the mechanism here, right? Pretty simple. Now, what about negation of indefinite articles? For example, I have a book, j'ai un livre. I don't have any book, je n'ai pas de livre. I have some books, j'ai des livres. I don't have any books, je n'ai pas de livres, right? Or for example, when you're talking about nationality, right? So for example, he is Belgian, il est belge. Il n'est pas belge, he is not Belgian, right? We read a book, nous lisons un livre. We do not read a book, nous ne lisons pas de livre. All right? So let's move on to the next page. So what about contractions, right? Because again, you will encounter these contractions very often, especially when you're reading. So for example, a accent aigu, as we covered, plus le, which pertains to masculine words, is equal to au, which is o. Okay? A plus le, it is aux, which is o as well, pronounced as o. De plus le is du, and de plus les is de. Okay, and this will make sense when you're reading. Okay, so this is just for explanation purposes as well. Now let's talk about the weather, right? So how do you say it's sunny? Well, il y a le soleil, right? So for example, how do you say it's nice? Il fait beau. It's warm, il fait chaud. The sky is clear, le ciel est dégagé. Okay, the sun is shining, le soleil brille. There's fog, haze or mist, la brume. Fog, le brouillard. Drizzle, la bruine. Okay, a drop of rain, une goutte de pluie, etc. So you have pretty much a complete list of how to depict the weather. Okay, so feel free to spend as much time as you want on this chart. Now let's talk about the verb to go, right? Because I believe this is also a very unavoidable verb that you might want to use. So this is in the present tense, once again, the verb to go, which is aller. So how do we conjugate this in present tense? It is je vais, I go, tu vas, you go, il va, he goes, elle va, she goes, on va, one goes, nous allons, we go, vous allez, you go, ils vont, they go, elles vont, they go, in the feminine form. Okay, So pretty much the same system. And below here, I have additional examples. Okay, so I'm not going to cover the future proche because this is another tense which might be a little bit more complicated. But again, I've included this just for those who might be a little bit more proficient and that might just need a little bit more details. Now let's talk about traveling, right? So regular verbs. So here, if you remember in the previous video, I said that there are three types of main groups in French. There are verbs of the first group, verbs of the second group, and verbs of the third group. Now, these are verbs of the second group, which terminate or end by IR. For example, the verb finish. How would you conjugate the verb finish in the present tense? Well, it is je finis, tu finis, il ou elle finit, nous finissons, vous finissez, ils finissent. So as you can see, the termination here is pretty complex. You can see it is ISSONS, right? ISSEZ and ISSENT. Okay. Now, what about possessive adjectives, which are very important as well, right? So, for example, mon, ma, mes means my, okay? Notre or nos means our, okay? Ton, ta ou tes means your. Son, sa, se means his or her. Votre, or vos means your as well. And leur or leur means their. Okay, so just keep in mind these as well because these are also unavoidable if you want to learn French. Okay, so example, if you want to say le livre de Marc, well, this translates into the Mark's book or the book of Mark. Okay, the book of Mark, as you can see the translation below. All right, and these are additional examples as well that you might want to work on. Now, these are additional words pertaining to traveling. So airport is aéroport, ticket is le billet, the post office is la poste, station la station, subway le métro, baggage les bagages, ticket le ticket, suitcase la valise, la chambre room, etc., etc. Now let's talk about regular verbs that end with RE, which are verbs of the third group. For example, the verb attendre, which is to wait. Listen carefully here for the verb attendre. In the present tense, it is j'attends. Now, why am I adding a J apostrophe? Simply because attend starts with a vowel, right? So remember, if we have a verb or noun that starts with a vowel, the preposition will be cut off and we'll just add the first letter of the pronoun plus the apostrophe, right? So it is j'attends, tu attends, il ou elle attend, nous attendons, vous attendez, et il ou elles attendent. Vendre is another example, which means to steal. Now, I'm not going to go over this again. This is just for additional practice. So feel free to try this one on your own. Okay, pause the video if you can, and you have the phonetics for the pronunciation and the translation as well. Now, let's talk about music. For those who love music, you might want to know a few musical instruments in French. So, écouter de la musique means to listen to music. Des paroles means lyrics or word. Le musicien, musician. Composer, le compositeur. L'auteur, writer. L'instrument, instrument. La clarinette, clarinet. Le violon, violin. La harp. La guitare, guitar. Le piano, piano. La flûte, flute. Okay, and then at the bottom, I have a few famous museums of France. Okay, so for those who are French lovers, here you go. You have a few museums that are prominent in France. And again, here I am talking about adjectives and nouns. For example, how would you say a handsome boy? Well, it is un beau garçon. Okay. Or, for example, an old truck, un vieux camion. Okay, but don't worry about this too much again because I will be providing to you in a separate video a list of adjectives that are prominently used in French and that you might want to memorize in order to become more fluent in French. At the bottom, I have plays of musical instruments. So again, for those who want to learn about the different verbs of musical instruments, this is the chart to go. All right, but let's move on to the next part, which is science. Okay, so science involves around many topics, right? So Um, Here, we will talk about the verb prendre, which is a verb of the third group, and because it ends with IR, how would you conjugate the verb prendre in the present tense, right? So same game here, same system, same rule, right? So je prends, I take, tu prends, you take, il prend, he takes, elle prend, she takes, on prend, one takes, nous prenons, we take, vous prenez, you take, ils prennent, they take, elles prennent, they take in the feminine version. And here you have a few additional verbs that you might want to memorize. So prendre is to take, apprendre to learn, comprendre to understand, se méprendre to be mistaken, surprendre to surprise. And again, I have idioms and related expressions at the bottom for you as well. Now, what about the different sciences, right? So biology, botany, zoology. Here on this chart, you have all the different sciences, okay? Like chemistry, physics, whatever. So you might want to also spend some time on this chart if you want to learn about the different sciences in French. What about the elements of the periodic table, right? So this is again not something I will be covering because it might not be very important for some of the viewers. So again, if you want to learn the elements of the periodic table in chemistry, this is the chart to go, all right? Astronomy as well is covered here, so with the different planets as well. And also keep in mind, sun means le soleil, the moon means la lune, which is a feminine word, and star, which is also a feminine word, which is l'étoile. All right, now we are up to level 2. I will stop this video for now, and I will meet you in the next video. Thank you for watching.
Welcome back, everyone. And in this next lesson, we will be talking about the different ways of communicating in French. So without further ado, let's dive into it. In this chart, you will see that I've mentioned the verb to know, which is connaître in French, all right? And the past participle is connu, okay? Why did I add a U at the end is simply because it's a verb of the third group, which I will be explaining in depth in an entire new video, okay? So if you want to conjugate the verb to know, connaître in French, this is how you would do it in the present tense. So it is je connais, tu connais, il connaît, elle connaît, nous connaissons, vous connaissez, ils connaissent for the masculine version, elles connaissent for the feminine version. And these are additional verbs for you to keep in mind. To appear, apparaître, to know, connaître, to disappear, disparaître, naître, to be born. All right. Here at the bottom here, I have another verb, which is to know, but with the verb savoir, which can also mean knowledge in French. Okay? And this is how you would conjugate it. Je sais, tu sais, il sait, elle sait. Nous savons, vous savez, ils savent, et elles savent. All right, so take your time to practice on these as much as you can to become more fluent. What about the verb to call, right? So appeler is to call in French. Now again, this starts with a vowel, so I will start off with a J apostrophe. So this is why I start with j'appelle instead of saying je appelle, all right, because of the vowel. Tu appelles, il appelle, elle appelle. Nous appelons, vous appelez, ils appellent. All right. The next verb is dire, which is to say. Okay. The past participle is dit, which is D. Again, I am not pronouncing the T at the end. Okay. This is just to differentiate between the different pronouns, as you can see on this chart as well. And at the bottom, I have a few mail related words, okay, like the post office, the letter, the mailbox, etc. All right, so here you can see that I've mentioned the verb to send, okay, which is envoyer, and it is the same methodology to conjugate this in the present tense. So you can pause the video and try this on your own. The next one here is to receive, which is recevoir, okay? So je reçois, tu reçois, and if you remember, What type of accent is this? This is called C accent CD. Okay, it's like a small hat, a small, I'll say hat below the C, and it is pronounced exactly like S in English. Okay, so je reçois, tu reçois, il reçoit. Nous recevons, vous recevez, ils reçoivent, elles reçoivent. All right. And then at the bottom here, I have different words related to computers and to internet for those that are computer science geeks or lovers, as I. Okay, we love computer science, so these are very important words to familiarize yourself with. For example, hardware is, as you know, le hardware en français, okay, or we can say le logiciel, which is a software. Okay, computer is l'ordinateur, monitor is écran, keyboard le clavier, mouse la souris, printer l'imprimante, and the list goes on. Okay, so feel free to have a look at this list as well. And I added a few other verbs here for you to keep in mind related to computers and technology. All right, so now we are at the level 3. So I assume that so far, if you're taking your time and you're doing your due diligence, you should be starting to understand, okay, the fundamentals, especially in terms of conjugating in the present tense. If you're still having difficulties, please feel free to reach out to me and I will be proud and glad and happy to assist you by providing you with even more additional resources and explanations. So here, as you can see on level 3, we'll be talking in an intermediate French level, okay? So we'll be talking about the different topics like work, like health, like money, like youth, etc., etc. So it will be interesting. So let's talk about vacations, right? So everyone likes to go on vacation. And what are the words that you might want to use when you go on vacation? So these words can be, for example, I'm taking the airplane. What is airplane in French? L'avion. Okay, what's your luggage or baggage? It is les bagages. What's your ticket? Le billet. And the list goes on. So feel free to keep this list readily available. That way you will become fluent. What is car, for example? La voiture. Okay, la voiture. All right, so for example, again, if you want to ask someone, where are you from? You can simply say, tu es d'où or d'où êtes-vous? Okay, you will say d'où êtes-vous if you're speaking to an elderly person. Okay, now these are geographical words at the bottom, as you can see. Um, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just very briefly, a city is une ville, okay? A village is un village, same word, just different pronunciation. A country is un pays, okay? See how I'm pronouncing this, un pays. Okay, normally if you see this, you might say it's pays. No, it is pays. Just remember that the Y in French is like a it's like a E in English. Okay, so pays, not pays, but pays, and I'm not pronouncing the S at the end. Okay, this is just how it is pronounced in French. A state is un état. Okay, river, le fleuve, mountain, la montagne, lake, le lac, océan, l'océan, and the list goes on. So here are these are just additional examples for those who want to learn a little bit more on how to talk about the geographical position. Okay? And just keep in mind, regions can be most of the time feminine or masculine. So I've written down many examples with their translations, just in case you want to know. Let's just try this one here at the bottom. Je vais au Québec. Okay? Je reviens du Québec. This means I am going to Quebec, Canada. I come from Quebec, Canada. Okay? So in this case, if you're saying you're going to somewhere, then you have to use the preposition au. But if you want to say you're coming from in French is du. Okay, just keep that in mind. There are countries that are singular. Okay, most of the time Countries are singular, so you will be using prepositions like AU and TU, like O2 or G or okay. So you have the translation here. But if you're talking about countries like United States, which is a plural country, I would say, right? Then you'll have to add a X at the end of AU because this is a plural term. All right, just keep that in mind. And at the bottom chart here, I've added other very important words like passport, le passeport, arrivals, departures, and French. And this chart is pertaining to the airport activities, okay? So for those who are traveling very often, you might want to stick a little bit on this chart. And this is a fabulous, fantastic list that I've included in this PDF for countries. Okay, so you have Polonia, you have Greece, you have their capital. So just keep in, if you want to learn more about countries, this is the place to be. Okay, so I'm not going to read all of these. As you can see, it's a huge list for the sake of time. But again, this is going to be your go-to-go list if you want to familiarize yourself with countries. Now, here is more about nationalities, okay? How to say that I'm a British, how to say I'm Italian, Japanese, Filipino, okay, Sweden, okay, Swedish. So, all of these here are nationalities, and you have their masculine and feminine form, okay? So, fantastic job here for anyone who is really trying to learn how to say where he is from. All right, so here, as you can see, this is about the perfect tenses, okay? So we have auxiliary verb formation and past participle formation. So keep in mind that the perfect tenses are also called the compound or composed tenses. The perfect tenses are all composed of a conjugated auxiliary verb and a fixed past participle. The auxiliary verb is always either avoir ou être. So the auxiliary verb will always be either to have or to be. The tense of the verb depends upon the tense that avoir or être is conjugated in. Okay, for example, if you want to say I have finished, then you will have to use eventually I have, which is j'ai in the present tense, plus the past participle of the verb finish, which is fini. All right, and here you have the rules of the past participle formation. Okay, and below here I've added multiple examples. Let's just view some of them. So, for example, j'ai fini la tâche is I have finished the task. So you can see same ball game here as on top, okay? So just keep that in mind. Now, how to know if you have to use to have or to be? In most circumstances, the auxiliary verb is avoir, okay? However, under certain situations, the auxiliary verb is to be, être. So this occurs when the verb is one of 16 special verbs, okay? That take être, and I think we've covered this in one of the previous videos. Remember, I gave you a mnemonic, so please feel free to check on the previous videos. Or if, for example, the verb is reflexive, for example, that is the subject of the verb is also its object. All right, but keep in mind, most of the time, it will be the verb to have. List of tenses. So these are the list of tenses. Now, again, French is a very broad language. So in this course, these are just the fundamentals here. We're not going to talk about all of these tenses, but it's good to know some of these tenses to strengthen your parlance, if I can say, or your proficiency. All right. So simple future. Now let's talk about the future tense, right? Because sometimes you might want to talk about the future. So for example, the verb to be successful in French is réussir. Now keep in mind, these are the add ending, okay? For each pronoun, these are the add ending. So for je, it is AI, tu, it is AS, il ou elle, it is A, nous, it is ONS, vous, it is easy, and ils ou else it is ONT. And this is going to be always the case for the future tense. So which is why the future tense is pretty much easy to conjugate. All right, let's talk about work, right? So we always go to work. We need to put food on the table eventually, right? So I believe that most of us have a job whatsoever. So these are words that you might want to familiarize yourself with in order to talk about anything pertaining to your work. So, for example, here you have, avoir, to drink, boire, to drive, conduire, come to know, connaître, okay, lire, to read. So, here is just a bunch of verbs, okay, that you might want to learn more about. Now, conjugated verb plus infinitive review. Okay, so the formation of a conjugated verb plus infinitive is the same in French as it is in English. You simply conjugate the first verb, then put the infinitive. Examples follow. So, for example, j'aime, tu aimes, il aime, nous aimons, vous aimez, il ou elles aiment. Okay, so for example, j'aime jouer au tennis. That's it. I like to play tennis. The only problem here is that in English, all the infinitive verbs are accompanied by to, right? But in French, you don't need to add a preposition like to in front of the verb. All you do is just simply add the verb in its infinitive form. So I would say that in French is pretty much easy. So what about the verb pouvoir, right? So the faire causative is formed by conjugating faire and adding an infinitive. So for example, je le fais réparer is I have it fixed. Okay? In the future proche, which is a other type of excuse me, it is another type of tense. This is very easy. For example, je vais aller, it is I'm going to. So the future proche tense is formed by conjugating aller in the present indicative and adding an infinitive. Okay? Negation, simply just add the ne and a pa in between the verb. Okay, so for example, je n'aime pas marcher, I don't like to run. J'aime ne pas marcher, I like to not run. Okay, so pretty easy and straightforward in this case. Here at the bottom, I've added a text which depicts a situation of a person who is unemployed. Okay, so I will just going to read it, and if you have a dictionary, feel free to verify the words that you are not familiar with. So, avant j'avais un travail, je travaillais dans une banque, mais la banque a fermé et je me suis retrouvé au chômage. Je n'ai plus de travail et j'en cherche tous les jours. Je lis les petites annonces et j'envoie des lettres de candidature. Je n'ai pas souvent de réponse, mais aujourd'hui, j'ai obtenu un entretien d'embauche. Avec un peu de chance, j'obtiendrai le travail. Now, let's talk about health, okay? For those that are medical doctors or working in the health industry, these are very important words to acknowledge. How would you say you have a headache? To have a headache is avoir mal à la tête. To have an earache is avoir mal à l'oreille. To have a toothache is avoir mal aux dents. To be sick, être malade. To have the flu, avoir la grippe. All right. To sneeze, éternuer. To faint, s'évanouir. To say to cough. To throw up, vomir, etc., etc. All right. So let's move on. Let's talk about adverbs, okay? Now, again, I'll be making a separate video entirely focusing on adverbs. So this is just a quick review of adverbs, okay? So all you need to keep in mind really is that anytime you see a noun which is terminated by ent, it is probably an adverb, okay? For example, the word vrai means true. But if you add vraiment, ment, then it becomes an adverb which is real and then really, or true, or truly. Poli, which is polite, if you add ment, then it becomes politely. So just keep in mind, ly of English is the ment in French, okay? So anytime you see ment as a suffix, it is an adverb. Some adverbs are derived from adjectives in completely irregular fashions. For example, bon, bien, good, well. Mauvais, mal, bad, badly, meilleur, mieux, pire, pis. Okay? So it just depends, but most of the time the rule is very simple. Whenever you see ment at the end, it is probably an adverb. All right, so here we have a text talking about visiting the doctor. So here is a basic conversation. Je suis malade, I am ill. J'ai mal à la tête, I have a headache. J'ai de la fièvre, I am feverish. J'ai mal au ventre, I have a stomach ache. Je vomis, I'm throwing up. Je tousse, I cough. Okay, so this is just a basic conversation. You can read through as you wish, and you can also use your dictionary. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me those questions in the comment section below. Always in the healthcare industry, pertaining to emergency fees, for example, right? And body parts. So body parts are also very important. All right, so for example, the head is la tête, body le corps, arm le bras, leg la jambe, and the list goes on all the way down to hair, which is les cheveux. Hair in French is always in plural, so you always say les cheveux, not le cheveu. Nail, l'ongle, toe, l'orteil, eye, les yeux. Okay, so this is the list for you, for those that are studying anatomy as well. Body position as well. Standing debout, sitting assis, laying down couché, kneeling à genoux, squatted accroupi. And that will be all for this video. I hope that you've learned a lot. Please take your time to review all those words, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. So in this section, we'll be talking about other topics such as money, very prevalent topics. So let's dive into it. Here in this case, as you know, money is also a broad topic, all right? And while the subject of a sentence initiates an action, the verb, the direct object is the one that is affected, okay, by the action. A direct object pronoun is used to refer to the direct object of a previous sentence. For example, if you say, Pierre voit le cambrioleur, it means Pierre sees the burglar. But if you want, you can actually just put the LE in front of the verb and just get rid of the burglar. So by saying Pierre le voit, Pierre sees him. Okay, and again, these are possessive direct object pronouns to keep in mind. Me, M, apostrophe TE, T apostrophe, LE, L apostrophe, LA, L apostrophe. Okay, so keep those in mind as well. All right. These are additional information. So for example, when the direct object comes before a verb in a perfect tense, a tense that uses a past participle, the direct object must agree in gender and plurality with the past participle. For example, in the phrase je les ai eus or I had them, the past participle would be spelled eus. If the direct object le was referring to a masculine object, and eus if le is referring to a feminine object. All right. And pretty much the same game for indirect object as well. So I have different explanations at the bottom below. Now, what about the pronoun y? This is something that you might encounter sometimes while reading. So the French pronoun y is used to replace an object of a prepositional phrase introduced by a accent aigu. Okay? Or a accent grave. So for example, je réponds aux questions, j'y réponds. I am answering the questions, and instead of saying je réponds aux questions, you can just say j'y réponds. So the y, as I said again, is used to replace an object of a prepositional phrase. Note that lui and leur and not y are used when the object refers to a person or persons. All right, so what about replacement of places by there? The French pronoun y replaces a prepositional phrase referring to a place that begins with any preposition except de. Okay? For example, les hommes vont en France, les hommes y vont. Right? So if you're talking about a place or a location, you can simply add the preposition y in front of the verb. The men go to France, the men go there. Okay, so here you simply replace the country or location by there. Okay, and I also have idioms, for example, ça y est, which means it's done, j'y suis, I get. Okay, and the preposition en is something that I've already covered in depth, but if you need more explanation, please feel free to read through. Now let's briefly talk about another tense, which is the present conditional. In this case, it is pretty similar to the future proche. Here, the only difference is that you will be adding s at the end, okay, and you will be adding I, okay, after for the pronouns nous, vous, and il ou elles, okay. And instead of ont, you will be using aient. Now, this is a conditional present, right? So this is the tense that you might be using if you want to talk about the present in a hypothetical or uncertain or ambiguous way. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about youth, right? So, for example, we covered the verb to play already, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. These are very important, as you can see. These are prepositions pertaining to a person or group of people. Okay, so for example, here you have le mien, which means mine, le tien, yours, le sien, his or hers, le nôtre, ours, le vôtre, yours, or le leur, theirs. Okay, so keep in mind and try to memorize the top one here, and you will be fine in regards to these type of pronouns and prepositions. An example is, vous avez votre voiture? You have your car? Oui, nous avons la nôtre. Yes, we have ours. Right? Now, pertaining to stem changing verbs, this is something I've already covered previously as well, so you can keep checking onto the previous videos for more details, or you can read through this part. Now, this is a list of words pertaining to children's games and toys. For parents, you might want to learn these words if you want to. All right, but not a big deal. I'll not be spending too much time on these. Let's talk about adolescence, right? So pop culture, for example, these are words pertaining to adolescence. Okay, for example, how to skip classes, faire l'école buissonnière, hang out with friends, flâner avec les copains. So these are just expressions that you can use if you're an adolescent, okay? And I also added reflexive verbs. For example, je me lave, I wash myself. Nous nous lavons, we wash ourselves. And I think this is also something that I've covered in a previous video. So just feel free to read through. Now, reciprocal verbs. For example, nous nous aimons, we like each other. Like reflexive verbs, the past participle of reciprocal verbs agrees in number and gender with the direct object. If it goes before the verb, it therefore agrees with all the reciprocal pronouns that function as direct objects. So, for example, nous nous sommes aimés, we liked each other. Okay? Other examples are nous nous sommes parlé, we spoke to each other. Elles se sont téléphonées, they called to one another. Vous vous êtes écrit souvent, you write to each other often. Okay? And then we also have something called imparfait or versus passé composé. Now, the difference between these two tenses is that the imperfect tense is used for past habitual actions, whereas the passé composé is actually used for actions that were done in the past. Okay? All right? Actions that were done in the past but are used to express punctual actions. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Le plus que parfait is another tense, but again, this is for intermediate and higher levels. So you might now want to familiarize with yourself with this tense as until you become more fluent in French. And I've added different examples on uh, very straightforward conversational sentence as well. So keep in mind to have a look at this if you want to learn a little bit more on simple phrases in French. Okay, now we'll talk about ancient history. All right, so in this case, you have to keep in mind that unlike English, there is a literary past tense used when writing formally. This past tense is the passé simple, okay? So anytime you want to talk about an action that was done in the past and that ended in the past, then you will be using the passé simple, okay? Now, what are the add endings of the past simple past tense? These are the add ending right here. AI, AS, A accent circonflexe MES, A accent circonflexe TS, and E accent grave RENT. Okay, so for example, to conjugate the verb dance to dance in the simple past tense, you would say je dansais, tu dansas, il dansa, nous dansâmes, vous dansâtes, ils dansèrent. Okay, so please feel free to repeat this as many times as possible to familiarize yourself with the past tense. I've added a verb of the second group and a verb of the third group. So this is for practice purposes and additional examples. All right, and again, this is an exercise for you, a practice exercise for you to try, okay? So I would like you to complete this by your own, okay? And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comment section below. Revolution, as you know, the French Revolution is a very prominent topic. So you can see at the bottom here, I've added a very complete list of irregular verbs and how to conjugate them in the past simple tense. Okay, so this is the chart that you really want to rehearse on. So I'm going to cover just a few of them very quick. So the verb to drive, for example, conduire, right here. You will say je conduisis, tu conduisis, il conduisit, nous conduisîmes, il conduisit, ils conduisirent. All right, and pretty much the same thing for the rest of the verse. So please feel free to spend time on this as you move forward. And you can see the list goes on. So I've added a lot of verbs. So here, for example, for the verb to be, you would say je fus, tu fus, il fut, nous fûmes, vous fûtes, et ils furent. Okay, now basically, a lot of French speakers do not use this tense very often while they speak because they feel that it's kind of peculiar. So it's not very often pronounced, okay, but it's really good to know because if you're reading a book in French, you might encounter these and at least you want to know what it means. All right. Now let's talk about relative pronouns like qui and que. So for example, les pronoms relatifs qui and que, relative pronouns begin adjective clauses. So for example, the man that was here, the man that I saw. So for example, the man that was here means in English, the man, okay, in French it means l'homme qui était là-bas. Okay, for example, je vois l'homme qui l'a fait. It means I see the man that did it. L'homme qui l'a fait est ici. The man that did it is here. Okay, so you can read through these as well because I've added the translation. So for the sake of time, I will skip forward. But please make sure that you read through all of these examples carefully. And these are just a few prominent French philosophers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Voltaire, and Denis Diderot. So in this next part of the course, we will be talking about the French Revolution. democracy, but I'm not going to spend too much time on these as it might not interest the most viewers. But I've just added this on in my PDF for all the French lovers out there. But again, of course, I'll be talking about the few the basic information here. So, for example, the verb I see, you can see I added comparative words, for example, more, as, or less. Okay, and yeah, you can feel free to spend some time on this chart as well. This is for comparative nouns. So, for example, je suis plus intelligent que toi. I am more intelligent than you. Now, what is superlative, right? So, le, la, and le plus ou moins plus an adjective, right? That's how you do it. And these are just pictures of some prominent architectural constructions in France. Current events, right? Now, in this case, you would want to use the perfect future tense, the future perfect tense. If you want to conjugate the verb to have, it will be j'aurais, tu auras. Well, this tense is actually used when you want to talk about something that you would love to happen or to do in the future, okay? Or something that you would have loved to do, right? Or you would have loved to have done, or to have accomplished, or to have said, okay? So in this case, for the verb to have, you will say j'aurais, tu auras, il aura parlé, elle aura parlé, nous aurons, vous aurez, ils auront, ou elles auront. And then the past participle can be any verb that you want to add. It can be the verb to speak, to do, to eat, etc., etc. And the verb to be, as you can see, is je serai, tu seras, il sera, nous serons, vous serez, ils seront, ou elles seront. Okay, and below I've added a few bunch of words pertaining to the news for journalists, for example. Okay, so for example, how do you say news? You say les nouvelles. How do you say news in a journalism, I would say, context? You would say l'actualité. Okay, and the list goes up. Now, these are French social problems. Now, again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This is just for those that are more interested in this, and also in politics. So I'll just skip this. French politics. So for those that want to familiarize themselves with the different political groups or parties in France, this is the page to be. Now, grammar, right? So I think this will be the end of this video. Grammar encompasses a lot of details. As you will see, we will talk about adjectives, adverbs, negation, prepositions, sentences, tenses, and verbs in the following videos. So please pay attention, and I'll be more than happy to see you in the next video. Thank you. Hi everyone, welcome to this new video where we will be talking about the adjectives. Okay, so as you know, adjectives are very important words, especially when you want to strengthen your vocabulary and you want to be explicit and precise in your language. So without further ado, let's talk about it. So just like articles, French adjectives also have to match the nouns that they modify in gender and quality. So in terms of spelling, most adjective changes occur in the following manner. For example, if you're dealing with a feminine word, you'll have to add an E to the masculine form. For example, un garçon intéressant, an interesting boy. But if you use une fille, which is a feminine word, you would say une fille intéressante. So you see that I am pronouncing the T at the end because it's a feminine word and I have to add an E. So other example is un ami amusant, an amusing friend, une amie amusante, un camion lent, une voiture lente. Okay? So anytime you're dealing with a feminine word or adjective, you will have to add an E at the end. Very simple. But if it's a plural word, then you don't need to deal with too much pressure, I would say. Same thing, you'll just have to add a S if it's a masculine word or a ES if it's a feminine plural word. For the pronunciation, again, I have the phonetic written down here, so feel free to rehearse on that as well. Now, what about irregular plural formation? So, for example, if you have a word which ends with S, right? In this case, for example, we have masculine singular, for example, un plafond bas, which means a low ceiling. If we were to add the plural form, it would still be des plafonds bas. So all you're changing is the S at the end of plafond, as you can see here. And it is the same thing for any word that or adjective that ends with S. Okay. Now for adjectives that end with X, okay, for example, généreux, which means generous, you do not change anything. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And then you also have for those adjectives that end with EAU, as you can see here, O just by the way means water, but you can often see many or multiple adjectives that end with EAU. So in case you want to add the plural form, all you'll have to do is add the X at the end, as you can see here. So one example is un nouveau jeu, the plural form des nouveaux jeux. So you can see that I added an X at the end here. AUX, un vent hivernal, des vents hivernaux. Okay? And same thing here for irregular feminine. So as you can see here, irregular feminine, we'll have a look here. So basically, no change for E terminations. Okay, so any adjective that genuinely and naturally ends with E in its standard state, you do not need to change anything. So for example, égoïste, populaire, sociable, sociable, timide, which means shy, énergique, dynamique, sympathique, etc. If the adjective ends with el, then you add a double le. If it's il, double le as well. If it's on, you add an ne. Okay, and here is the list. Okay, so it's a very long list, and you might need to practice on this. Okay, so you can see these are all various terminations of adjectives in French. And on the right side here, you have their feminine form. Okay, so feel free to spend some time on this as you want, as you wish. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the comment section below. Now, special rules, right? So for example, adjectives that precede nouns. So adjectives that are used frequently before nouns, these are beau, belle, jolie, okay? For example, nouveau, jeune, gentil, mauvais, vilain, grand, grande, petit. All of these adjectives will end with the E in their feminine version, okay? So these adjectives can sometimes be placed after a noun and may change in meaning. But one rule of thumb that you can keep in mind is that in French, in comparison with English, if I say, for example, a red car, in French, I have to say une voiture rouge. So the adjective comes after the noun. So instead of saying a red car in French, I have to say a car red. Okay? So you have to keep in mind that in French, the adjective comes after the noun in most cases. Okay? Now, the changes in meanings, of course, it can happen. But again, you don't want to make that a priority right now because the first thing here is to know the rule of thumb. But again, just keep in mind in French, most of the time the adjective will come after the noun. Okay, now let's talk about possessive adjectives. So we have for the first person singular, we have mon, ma, mes, which means my and mine, okay, and ours or mine. And second person singular, which is ton, ta, tes, so your, yours, okay? And the list goes on. Now, demonstrative adjectives, you have ce, ce, which means this, okay, this and that, okay, and these. Okay, so this is ce, set is that, set is for a feminine version, and ce is these, okay, these in English. So ces enfants means these kids or these children. All right, what about proverbs, right? So for adverbs, right? all you have to do is add a ly at the end of the adjective, right? So, for example, that's in English. But in French, if you want to add an adverb, then all you need to do is take the adjective and add ment. Okay, so for example, vrai is going to be vraiment, real, really, poli, poliment, polite, politely, constant, constamment, récent, récemment, précis, précisément, gentil, gentiment, etc., etc. Okay. Now here, the placement of French adverb is almost the same as the placement of English adverbs. But one thing I can tell you is that for adverbs, you don't really need to bang your head against a wall. Okay, it's not that difficult. Okay, and it's not that confusing, and it really doesn't alter the meaning as an adjective. So you can actually place the adverb anywhere you want around the noun. It won't change the meaning most of the time. So you don't need to worry about this very much. Okay, now grammatical gender. In French, all nouns have a grammatical gender. That is, they are masculine or feminine for the purpose of grammar only. Okay, most nouns that express entities with gender, like people and animals, use both a feminine form and a masculine form. For example, the two words for actor in French are acteur and actrice. Okay, the nouns that express entities without gender, objects, and abstract concepts have only one form. This form can be masculine or feminine. For example, la voiture can only be feminine, le stylo, which is the pen, can only be masculine. All right. Examples here, you have le cheval, the horse, le chien, the dog, le livre, the book, le bruit, the noise. Now, I always tell my students that there's no golden rule or rule of thumb to know if a noun will be masculine or feminine. This comes with experience, okay? That is the reason why you'll see very often even French native speakers make these mistakes, and it's totally normal. All you need to do is just read often and it will come naturally. All right. Now, let's talk about, we already talked about feminine and masculine versions, as you can see, and the plural. Now, what about the indefinite articles? So in English, the indefinite articles are A and N. Some is used as a plural article in English. So again, indefinite articles in French take different forms depending on gender and plurality. Okay? The articles un et une literally means one in French. Okay, so for example, if I say une fille, that means a daughter. If I say un fils, a son. Okay, so anytime you say un et une, that means one. Okay, and we also talked about pronouns, as you can see. So this is a very good chart right here at the bottom for you to rehearse on pronouns, as we've already covered previously. Negation, right? So negation in French is most oftenly expressed by these two terms, which is ne et pas. So basically, if you want to express your negation, all you need to do is add the noun in between ne and pas. Okay, and here I've written multiple examples here. So simple negation is done by wrapping ne pas around the verb. Je ne vole pas, I do not steal. In a perfect tense, ne pas wraps around the auxiliary verb, not the participle. So for example, je n'ai pas volé, I haven't stolen. When an infinitive and conjugated verb are together, ne pas usually wraps around the conjugated verb. Je ne veux pas voler, I do not want to steal. Ne pas can also go directly in front of the infinitive for a different meaning. Je veux ne pas voler, I want not to steal. That's also acceptable, but not often used as this way. Ne goes before any pronoun relating to the verb it affects. So, je ne l'ai pas volé, I did not steal it. Nous ne nous aimons pas, we do not love each other. Other negative expressions we have aucune, jamais, ni, pas encore, personne, guère, ne, que, ne, rien. Okay, and I've written down the translations for you here and some examples at the bottom. So to say not, never, or other negative verbs, you have to sandwich the negative words around the verb. Okay, so for example, il n'y a pas de cinéma, there's not a cinema, on ne peut jamais aller en boîte, you can never go partying, il n'y a rien à faire ici, there is nothing to do here. If ne is before a vowel, then it changes to an apostrophe, as we've covered with the le word. Now, prepositions, right? So prepositions are also very important. So here you have a very good list of all the prepositions you might need to know in French. So à accent grave means it can mean to, at, of, or in. À côté de, à l'intérieur de, après, avec, chez, dans, de, derrière, devant, un, ici, là, loin de, par, près de, pour et sans. So this is also a list that you might want to pause, you might want to print out and work on, because if you master the prepositions, it will be much easier for you to express yourself, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time on this as pertaining to the time. We don't want to make the videos very long, but again, I've written down everything for you to understand the meaning of these prepositions. And sur is also a very good preposition here, and these are all the alternative definitions, okay, of the preposition sur. It can mean on, upon, on top, all the way down to 7 sur 10. Pronouns, right? So again, we've covered pronouns, but this is also something that you can look on, especially if you want to develop a better understanding of pronouns, but I'm not going to spend too much time on this. So feel free to print this part as you wish. Now let's talk about direct and indirect object pronouns. As you can see here, me, me means me to me, te means you to you, lui means to him or to her, nous means us to us, vous, you to you, leur to them. All right. Le, la, and les, le, la, les, and la, and are pronouns which are used as direct objects and hence are called direct object pronouns. A direct object is a noun that receives the action of a verb. Il jette la boule, he throws the ball. Okay, le replaces a masculine singular direct object, la replaces a feminine singular direct object, l'apostrophe replaces le and la if they come before a vowel, les replaces plural direct objects, both masculine and feminine. The direct object pronouns come before the verb they are linked to. Il la jette, he throws it, il les jette, he throws them. Okay, lui and leur are indirect object pronouns, okay, are prepositional phrases with the object of the preposition. For example, il jette la boule à Jacques, he throws the ball to Jack, etc. All right, multiple examples are down below. E, I think I've already covered as well, is an indirect object pronoun which replaces the pronoun, okay? So for example, je réponds aux questions, I am answering the questions. You can say simply, j'y réponds. Okay, so you're not mentioning the questions, but you're just saying j'y réponds, which means that you're actually answering those questions. So Y here is most of the time used to replace a noun. Okay, idioms, ça y est, it's done, j'y suis, whatever, etc., etc. Now, en, which is pronounced en, is a replacement of a portative construction. So, for example, the pronoun en replaces a noun with a particle or portative article. Okay, for example, je veux du pain, j'en veux. So I want the bread, you can simply say j'en veux, I want it. Okay, I want some bread, I want some. Okay, so this is just one example and replacement of quantified nouns. If the quantity of the object is specified, en is used for the replacement of the noun. Example, il a acheté 2 pommes, il en a acheté 2. Right? He bought 2 apples. He just bought 2 of them. That's also one way to replace those nouns. Pronoun order. So this is a very good chart to know the order of the pronouns. So je, tu, il, nous, vous, il. So me, you, he or she, we, you in a professional way, and them or they. Okay? And I think we already talked about this. Now, these are order rules. So when a sentence uses the indirect object pronouns, me, te, nous, right? With the direct object pronouns, le, la, and les, me, te, nous, vous go first. Okay, for example, il me le donne, he gave it to me. But for example, when Y is used in the same sentence as other pronouns, Y goes after all of them with the exception of EN. Il m'emmène à Paris, he takes me to Paris. Il m'y emmène, he takes me there. Y in conjunction with en is only used in a few cases. For example, il y en a, there exist several ones. Est-ce qu'il y a des pommes? Are there any apples? Etc. So these are just, for those out there or that are willing to increase their proficiency. These are good details to also acknowledge. Now, what about l'impératif? So when expressing positive commands, there are several rules one must remember when using object pronouns. These are the pronouns are attached to the verb with a hyphen. So for example, retrouve là, okay? Find it, which means find it, right? Donnez-moi les vidéos, give me the videos. Donnez-le-moi, give it to me. For the second person singular form, an S is added if the object in the pronoun form begins with a vowel or Y. Va au tableau, go to the blackboard, but vas-y, go there. Vas-y, come on. So vas-y means come on. Okay, and here is another chart for possessive pronouns. So feel free to use this chart as you wish in order to master the possessive pronouns. Okay, so for example, le mien, which means me, mine, right? Le tien, yours. Le sien, his or hers. Le nôtre, which means ours. So it's very good and nice to use these possessive pronouns whenever you're speaking as well. For example, elle est ta voiture. Is that your car? Oui, elle est à moi. Yes, it is mine. Sentences, right? So we want to learn or we need to learn how to build sentences in French, right? So subject, verb, direct object, or indirect object, right? So if, which is si with present tense, le présent, si plus le présent, le futur simple. Example, if you finish your homework, I'll give you some candies. Si tu finis les devoirs, je te donnerai des bonbons. Si le présent, l'impératif, example, if you're cold, close the window. Si tu as froid, ferme la fenêtre. With imperfect, l'imparfait past tense to express hypothetical situations. So si again is to express hypothetical situations. If I had $1 million, I would buy a house. Si j'avais $1 million, j'achèterais une maison. And the list goes on. What about interrogation, right? So as in English, raising the tone at the end of a sentence can turn it into a question. For example, il aime les bonbons, he likes sweets. Il aime les bonbons, does he like sweets? So all you need to do sometimes is just keep the same standard sentence, but just put or raise the tone at the end of the sentence. Est-ce que literally means is it that? Understood as is it true that? And can be used to form questions. So for example, est-ce que tu peux aller au travail? Is it true that you can go to work? So this is very important as well, and I highly recommend you whenever you want to ask a question, start with est-ce que and just go ahead and ask any type of question you want. For example, he likes this film. Does he like this film? Inversion, right? So now an example, do you like apples? You like apples. Aimes-tu les pommes? Tu aimes les pommes. All right. So one thing you will see also in French is sometimes the inversion of the verb pronoun relation. It is absolutely normal and it is often used whenever you want to ask a question. And these are question words that you might also want to know. So où, where, quand, when, pourquoi, why, comment, how, quel, which, qui, où, who, combien, how much, quoi, what. Okay, so very important. Tenses, right? So again, I'm not going to be spending too much time on this because again, the goal here is not to master all the tenses in French, but it's good to know some of them. So for those who are interested, you can have a look on this page just to learn about them. Simple tenses, all of these are very good. All right, now verbs, and I'll end this video right here. So I hope that you've learned a lot about how to ask questions, okay, and how to come up with adverbs in French. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.